What's up, MetaNerdz? This video will look at the problem of mortars in Star Wars. You might not even remember any of them being used. They're certainly underutilized. But the deeper I dug, the more mortar types I was able to find across all eras. So to understand the difference in how they work in the galaxy far, far away, let's start by understanding how they work here on Earth. It's somewhat like a gun. When the trigger is pulled, the firing pin strikes the back of the cartridge, igniting the propellant inside, sending the bullet down the tube, the barrel. The mortar is the same idea, except you are dropping the mortar onto the firing pin that is located down in the base of the mortar tube. This activates the primary charge, and there can be augmenting charges above this area. By adjusting the amount of charges here, you can adjust the power pushing the mortar, affecting the range that it can reach out to. The fins help to give it a spin that helps it maintain its trajectory through air resistance, and when it hits the ground, it's kind of like a cartridge again, but in reverse, as the knob sticking out striking the ground is the firing pin for the main explosive packed into the mortar head, the part that's actually doing the damage. And of course, there are countless variants of this by changing what is packed into the head, and by changing the tip that can be a fused for timed explosions so that you can air burst. And the internals can have everything from infrared illuminators for night vision, more common visible light like flares, and smoke and types of explosives for different threats. And these have been around at least since a naval battle in Korea in 1413, and the line gets blurry from then on what's a mortar, cannon, or artillery piece. But since World War I, there have been the Stokes mortars, which would be relatively easy to move around and fired by a small team. With all the upgrades in mortar tech, the mortar team is still considered to be one of the most effective and deadly. So why don't we see it used more in the galaxy where warfare involves masses of armies rushing towards each other? Let's thank our sponsor, Marvel Strike Force. Marvel Strike Force is a mobile RPG that allows you to battle your favorite team of superheroes and villains in a fight to save the universe against threats like Doctor Doom and Apocalypse. Your goal is to power up your favorite characters to complete missions, unlock gear and other resources, and beat other players in PvP modes such as Alliance, War, and Real-Time Arena. You recruit both heroes and villains from across the multiverse, including Iron Man, Wolverine, Venom, and much more. From there, you'll power up your character to take on game modes like Campaigns, Arena, and Blitz. And new ways to battle with your roster are released regularly. The meta is constantly evolving, so use my link down in the description to install Marvel Strike Force today. Be sure to do it now because for a limited time this month, by using the QR code or clicking that link in the description, you'll unlock these exclusive characters for free just by logging in. Celebrate the release of the Spider Society team by adding more Spider-Verse characters to your roster for a free Spider-Man 2099 and Scarlet. Enter the promo code MSF6 for the 310 Deadpool shards, 500 power cores, and 5 premium orbs. If you've already played the game, use promo code NIGHT to receive 15 Nightcrawler shards, 500 power cores, and 5 premium orbs. Thanks again, Marvel Strike Force. Be sure to download using that link down below. With the largest conflict, the Clone Wars, having enormous ranks of droids advancing as the main CIS tactic. Well, of course, the obvious answer is the plot willed it, but there are several models used across the eras, and all of them seem to take this simple weapon system and make it far too complicated, but there are some really neat sci-fi features. The large base plate contains an electromagnetic launch system, making this more like a railgun, as it removes that system with the firing pin and primary charge to send it through the tube, as well as those augmenting charges. Instead, it's all calculated via a computer. Repulsor tech, and most electronics in general, are much cheaper and used in common everyday things to the point that they're not even using wheels. So it keeps the cost down low, but we do have to wonder if you have to recharge these mortar systems. As annoying and strange as that might sound though, it is replacing all the explosive used in that primary charge that sends it out of the tube. So being able to recharge it anywhere is probably actually more flexible than having to rely on this propellant. And so we also don't have those augmenting charges sending it further. Instead, everything's calculated via a computer. And while this is the highest quality model to show, the lore says that they all work this way. This targeting computer would compensate for wind and other environmental factors like trees, buildings, or hills, showing you where your shell will land. Most used a magazine. This model used by the clones had a mag of 5 shells, and you can set the computer to auto-fire. I'd imagine you could set up the time interval between each shot, maybe even set when, and having automated movement across up to 5 targets. And like we see with other explosive ordnance, there must have been the wider range of versions from smoke to flak, high explosive rounds for personnel, and armor defeating variants for holding off invasions or sinking shells through Duracrete buildings. Though by far the most common, the only one we actually see in use, was the HE mortars that would cause damage similar to fragmentation grenades, as the body of the mortar breaks into thousands of deadly shards. But despite all that high tech, like most things in Star Wars, most obviously the speed of ships, the stat on its distance seems stuck in the World Wars era, as they have a minimum range of 75 meters, but only a max range of 750 meters. Modern mortars on Earth can fire less than 70 meters, though of course not too much less, since you don't want to be on top yourself when that lethal blast radius can be up to 30 meters wide, sometimes 60 meters where you're still feeling damage, but it is nice to have as many options as possible. For example, the M224 commonly used by the US military can get out to 3,400 meters, with each crew capable of sustained fire of around 15 rounds per minute. So mortars could have been blowing through the droid unit ranks, but then again, so could countless other weapons in their arsenal. We need to keep in mind that just like in real life, all your military resources are not always available everywhere at once, and prioritizing one thing means you take away somewhere else. And overall, the more common combination of clone trooper with blasters, both in the carbine and rifle version, and the occasional sniper or C6 rotary cannon almost always did the trick. Especially when you can call in air support, which was often nearby as planetary invasions often required rapid deployment to major sites and cities. Not a typical long conquest spreading over a continent like here on Earth. Other details on this clone mortar system are that it was only 2,500 credits, which is only 300 credits more than the DC-15 blaster rifle. But of course, running this system would be far more expensive. And it did weigh 20 kilograms, or 44 pounds, which is just around the M224 and nearly 5 times the DC-15. Before turning to the other versions, I wanted to just point this out about the traitorous Jedi General, the level of evil for Krell to make sure that both units were packing mortars. A more rare armament, he might have had to go out of the way to make sure they had these, knowing that he had fed both the lie that the other force was native Umbarans disguised in clone armor. It's just an extra little twisted detail here, as these indirect fire weapons were perfect for this plot, as the clones could confirm the apparent enemy at a distance and celebrate as these precise mortar explosions took the lives of their brothers, creating a sense of fear and distraction as the shells flew overhead, pressuring the troops to kill the enemy as quick as possible, depriving them of any time to pause and assess the threat. It was only the good luck, or perhaps the force, that helped Rex notice the slight angle that his fallen brother was laying on the ground, giving him a chance to see under the helmet, seeing those recognizable features his brothers all shared. From that dark note, let's look at the actual enemy to the clone trooper, the B2 Mortar droid, which carried a lighter system, which is kind of funny when you think about it being hauled by the brawny B2. It doesn't suffer from muscle fatigue, but it does point to the great bug engineers at Factoid who made sure to be efficient in everything they did. This did not have the special ordinances, but used the railgun-like effect to fire thermal grenades. And though it's called a mortar, it is shooting grenades, so while it is perfect for logistics, it does make you wonder if it is a proper mortar. I'll agree with the designation on this one, but what's funny is that the MMS-3 grenade launcher is the weapon that is used on the so-called Mobile Mortar 3. Like some odd Pokemon Digimon kind of evolution, you put this grenade launcher and a WW676 repulsor lift sled together, and according to the Imperial ATF, you just made yourself a Mobile Mortar assault vehicle. What's neat about this is that it connects via magnetic clamps and can be quickly removed to really shock those rebel traders or innocent villagers, whoever you were attacking that day. But turning back to the proper mortars, the ATRT is said to have had one for around 20 years at this point, and it's even in the new canon sources, but I don't really understand where this would be. I think it makes sense to say that the recon transports would use their cargo capacity to haul them around, since it really can be operated by just one person. And since the advanced recon force troopers were experts at getting behind enemy lines, a squad of ATRTs could get in position and rain down destruction before the enemy knew it hit them. Remember, they have that computerized firing system and could delay fire, meaning it could wait to fire until the ARFs felt they were far enough away to avoid capture. Or they could drag it out to have multiple mortars fire from multiple spots for over an hour or more, making it seem like a large spread out force was trying to assault the CIS position. Or time it to cover their evac, after the ARFs extracted some intel or VIP from a Separatist stronghold. If pursued, the mortars would rain down fire at the perfect time. And although the standard ATSTs would have a small grenade launcher unit, it could be swapped out for a mortar launcher. It did not have the typical tube-style look, but there appear to be 3 rows of 4 tubes built into this assembly. And really it's just a larger version of the DF-90 mortar system, which was most often used by coastal defender stormtroopers, here with 2 of these unique slit-style openings, and fires with such force that it needs these 2 large leg braces on each side, and likely needed some sort of vehicle to get this thing into position, as it just seems too heavy for a single trooper to carry. Which is a really rare style, and in the way it might be used, it reminds me of the Hedgehog, aka the anti-submarine projector used during World War II. It would fire 24 mortars at once, forward of the ship when engaging U-boats, when they were tipped with contact fuses so that they would sink down below the water and only explode when they hit the hard metal sub, meaning they didn't lose force through the water like with depth charges, resulting in a 10x kill ratio, as the average was about 60 charges per U-boat destroyed and only 5.7 Hedgehog attacks to down a sub. And who knows, if you want to pick one up yourself, there might still be some laying on the sea floor. And the Imperial remnant carried on the tradition with the Artillery Stormtrooper, aka Mortar Stormtrooper or Shell Trooper, which used the Model 201 mortars. Just like its Clone Wars era predecessor, it was built by Mersun Munitions, but now the cost jumps up to 5,400 credits. Using that same electromagnetic mass driver system, but it is stated to fire larger shells, which might explain that higher cost. Denoted with this yellow coloring, they would carry this backpack which had 3 different types of shells, your standard thermal detonator, and what might be a smoke or flare, and then 2 other smaller explosive versions. And it is said that this was used during the Clone Wars, but we never actually see it in action, and that detail comes from the Rise of the Separatists sourcebook. But that's it for the odd case of mortars in Star Wars universe. And as for behind the scenes facts, in Star Wars Battlefront 2, Prima official guide, it says that the snail tanks have mortars, but I couldn't find any other source that mentions this. It doesn't really make sense, and all the other stats say that it has heavy repeating blasters and concussion missiles. The mobile mortar comes from the New Essential Guide to Weapons and Technology and Arms and Equipment Guide, and the mortars are mentioned in the High Republic novels and comics, as well as the Battlefront books, and into the New Republic Aftermath books. Please hit that like button, it's the best way to help me out. Subscribe to see more, and check out these videos, I'm sure you'll like them. But most important of all, remember, a set it and forget it automated mortar system might just make up for the fear of having to worry about a low battery on your mortar system. And the Force will be with you, always.